So a very warm welcome on Thursday lunchtime to everybody. We're on day 4 of Volunteer Week. We've had a great series so far, thanks to Joe for pulling all the teams together. And you're more than welcome to watch anything you missed or couldn't find the slot on catch up. We'll make sure they're available on the Slack channels. This again is a project actually that started from a volunteer assembly, which was one of the first hackathons that the STA ran, and has been how would you say a team that's seen a lot of people move on to finding work, and a lot of people have come in to help kind of get this over the line. It's also been one of the first projects that was an independent team then reaching into the platform team to get it over the line. And Brad, you kind of came to this through the platform team, didn't you? So we have three fantastic presenters here with us today. I'll let Alex, Brad, and Amber introduce themselves, but thank you guys for the extra time and putting this together for us. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Joe. Thanks everyone for coming along to our presentation. We're very close to delivering this project. We actually have 2 hours after this presentation, and we have another meeting with the client when we hand over the project and complete this stage of its development, and it'll then go for use with Argyll's museum. We have a presentation which we're going to run through, tell you a bit about the team, what we're doing, our challenges, and how we address them. So Brad, if you go up to the first slide, great. We're just going to be going through meet the team. I'll quickly give you an intro of who the team are currently, who they were in the past, quick look at the problem, how we approached it. Brad will do a demonstration and take you through how we overcame a lot of the problems, challenges which we faced, and then question and answers at the end. So if you have any pressing questions, just ask us as we're going through the presentation. The team, Brad, if you do the next slide. The team currently is Amber, who is our product owner, who I'll be handing over to in a second, myself as a Scrum Master for the final stage of the project, and Brad, who is the lead developer and has got the project ready to actually hand over to the client. You'll see from these pictures here, we look a bit Scrum Master heavy. David there was the previous Scrum Master who I took over from, as his work commitments meant he had to go off and do other stuff. We had a team before that, several members. You can see here, there are a couple of names I'm going to find difficult to pronounce, so I think you just let you read the individual names there. They got the project up and running. It's kind of like a relay team. We took over the baton at the last stage and have got a project ready to hand over to the client. As I said, the delivery is later today. And the current team who we're dealing with have achieved that, but on the shoulders of the team previously, who've got the project up and running and ready to go. We had further, without going too much into the challenges we faced, one of which was the change also of the team of the client, who had a period without any CEO, who was our main contact, and then a new CEO. So we had to obviously address that and make sure that they were up to speed. That's really my part of the presentation. I'll hand over to Amber, who'll talk you through the issues that we faced. Thanks.
Hi, hello everyone. So basically our problem was that we were trying to build something for the stakeholder that would allow those who visited the museum, whether it was family or a serious researcher, to be able to connect the battles to soldiers. And so the museum currently had a website, but they were looking for something a little bit different to add to the website so that this could be completed. So basically the problem was that they didn't have this resource. So we came up with the interactive map at that point. And kind of like Alex was saying, there were a series of different people who assisted with this project. So when I came in as product owner, we kind of had to navigate a little bit differently and look at the scope of the project a little bit more. So our approach, basically, we tried to introduce a little bit more of a Scrum approach, but it wasn't something that we pushed very heavily because we know, again, there are different people on the team, so not everybody was privy to Scrum. But basically, David did a great job of just having weekly meetings. Alex took over from there, and just basically trying to have that transparency of everybody being on the same page, and creating again that clear definition of done, because again that had kind of gotten lost a little bit between the transition of team members, and just needing to have that consistency a little bit more with the stakeholder. And again, that created a little bit more of a problem once there was a new person at the museum. So basically, just kind of regrouping a little bit so that we could have a more self-managing team. And again, a lot of that fell on the developers to be able to figure out what the problems were. And I know Brad can talk a little bit about that, because when he came in, some of those problems were still there, like with the data. And so, yeah, that's basically where we just revisited the scope and try to figure out what the solution would be. So these are just some of the things that we use. So we were able to use like a Jira board to keep the team looped in. And then we looked at just basically the team dynamics and kind of where we could help weekly. Again, it wasn't a whole lot with technicalities, but it was in just trying to come together to figure out what the impediments were, and just trying to again really just figure out the best time to meet with the stakeholders so that we can get a clearer vision as far as what we were trying to accomplish. And so basically, again, just trying to figure out what needed to be delivered, how to deliver it, and then also maintaining like the cost effectiveness for the museum as far as turning that over as well. And so now Brad will demo, and again, we'll have questions at the end.
Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly switch screen because I'm going to do one of the worst practices that you can possibly do in technology, and that is a live demo. And that's just because I didn't really get time to record a video or anything. But yeah, I thought the best way to show this is sort of showing you around the map and what we did and what technologies it's built on and how that's come about. So yeah, as the guy said, my name's Brad. I've been acting as a developer on this project, and I was originally brought in to fix like a bug in the JavaScript, essentially. Like they wanted to go from one page to another, and the state wasn't passing. And the view was, right, from here, we're going to fix this bug, and then we're going to release the first stage of the product to the customer. When I started to work on this project, though, it wasn't quite ready in the state that it needed to be for the customer to be able to view it. So there are a couple of things that needed addressing first. And actually, the biggest task that I've actually done on this project is removing code, sadly. It's like trimming down the product to something that we can actually release and get out to users based on the data that we currently have, rather than like building for future requirements. So what you can see here is this is Stirling Castle plotted on a map, and that's the home of our museum. That's the home of the regiment, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. And yeah, they're really passionate about maintaining the history of this regiment, because the regiment no longer exists as like an active serving regiment. So they have an archive of soldiers going right up to the 1990s. For this, we focused on soldiers that fought in World War One. That meant that we didn't have to deal with any GDPR issues because they've all been dead more than 100 years. And yeah, the data set was better going back further, which sounds counterintuitive, but yeah, it actually worked out that way. So what you're looking at is a React application that uses the Leaflet Maps open source library. On top of that, there's also some React component libraries that help with the design, also with interacting with the leaflet maps. And from here, what the museum wants to be able to do is to search through the database of soldiers based on a few different attributes and plot them on a map detailing the place they were born. As well as that, they want to go into the detail of some battles, but we got a little bit less data on what actually happened in those battles, except for what we can find on Wikipedia. So there's less been done around that, although the battles that they fought in are still plotted on the map. So you can zoom into an area and you can find out right now which soldiers that fought in World War One, for the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, were born in which area. The added complexity to this is actually maps were completely different 100 years ago. Most places in Scotland had different names, like a lot of places, and they had different area boundaries. And so you try and map that against what we currently call a longitude and latitude of that maps use for GPS, compared with just what was likely to be a county, or sometimes you get down to a street level, sometimes you get a village. But you can see in these areas where they were heavily recruited, like Edinburgh, Stirling, Glasgow, you get a lot of soldiers all in one spot, and it can be quite hard to visualize them. So once we first got all the data onto a map, we talked about how you could actually narrow that down so you could see them a bit easier. So filtering them by rank was one way to do that, and you can now go through and just look at Lance Corporal through Corporal. I'm not really sure of the hierarchy. I'm sure that would upset the museum. That one of their feature requests for us was actually, when we put these on a map, can you actually organize them by hierarchy and rank? And their imagination like far outweighs my skill set. So we tried to talk them down and simplify those types of requests into something that we can manage. You can also filter by surname on the database, so we can find all of the Smiths, so you can search for your own family name and bring them up. So you might be thinking, well, what's kind of the point of this? The point for the museum is they want to keep interaction with all of the like past patrons that have come through the museum and all of the relatives of anyone who served. And they want to do this by going on a drive to acquire more data about all the soldiers. So they want to spread this type of application out through their social media channels, and give the opportunity for anyone who does have a relative to add more information and to pass on any photos that they have, any anecdotes, and really create a place for all of the relatives from the regiment to share across with each other, and to learn a little bit more, enhance their own archive, and give back to what the soldiers gave to them, really. So when we presented this to the customer, the initial feedback was, right, this is great, but it doesn't look like you've got all of our data on the map. Like, that's not all of the soldiers we had. We had a few more than that. And yeah, they were right. The response is, what we had to do was we had to look at a minimum data set to be able to plot them on a map. And that is that most of their data, only 91% of their data, didn't have a place of birth for any of their soldiers. So they were a little bit, the point where they wanted to be and the point where they currently are was a big gap between what they actually had. So we had to educate them on what this was going to look like in its finished version, and that actually there might need to be a stage 2 to get to your endpoint. So what stage 2 would look like, and what we envisage them being able to do, is we want to list the number of soldiers that they have in their database. So they have around 30,000 soldiers. And yeah, as I said earlier, it's like 5,000 to 6,000 that actually have a place of birth. So 5,000 to 6,000 that we can plot on a map. They want to be able to offer visitors the chance to claim a soldier, to say that was my relative, and to then send them more data to go along with that. So we spoke a little bit about how a map doesn't really lend itself very well to that type of solution, because there's nowhere to plot them beforehand, and creating UI that puts all the soldiers in one place and has lists that filter through is really rather complex. And actually what they want to do is they want like an incomplete archive that they can use different search parameters, and then they can have a contact form. So I put together a rough, I guess, proof of concept. This is AI generated UI. So it's a way of just getting something in front of them as quickly as possible with a few prompts. And yeah, this is where we would go in stage 2. So we would have a tab to flip between an archive view and a map view. The map would have the 5,000 with a place of birth, and the archive would have every other soldier. You'd then be able to search by a place of birth, a surname, the rank, or maybe a battle they fought in if we have that data, because it is largely inconsistent. And then they want to be able to have the option for a contact button or a contact form for those users, so they can click on it, fill in more details, and then get back. So yeah, really where we're up to is releasing this map to the museum. They can use it internally and reach out on their social media channels and start to say, this is our point of contact going forward. We're going to be updating soldiers on here as soon as we have more data about them. And yeah, this is how you can start to enrich our archive, and then in the future we'll have this where you can search through everything that we've got, which is a more longer term view. So I'm just going to pause because I've just talked quite a bit about the tech. I don't want to miss anything off, but I've got some other slides to share on what we found sort of going through this project. But does anybody have any questions at this stage about maybe the technology side of things?
Looks brilliant, Brad and team. It's really cool, considering that the raw data I saw, I was like, oh my God, there's not much data for some of this stuff. How you managed to boil that down into useful visual, and it looks much better. I think the example given right at the beginning was the Edinburgh University witches. So it looks much better than that example that was shared. They must be delighted. Well done, guys.
Thanks a lot. That's one thing that I can't take any credit for at all, is the design. So when I came to the project, the design was like, there'd been a lot of work put into that, and I can see that. And there was a lot of Figma files, and I don't know who the people were that contributed to the design, but I know it was Sam and Dougie that did a lot of the front end, turning those designs into the code. And yeah, the work that I did was boiling that down to what's the minimum set of requirements that we can currently build to and release, and then what's the best mechanism to deploy this type of application and get it out. And then from here, obviously we could build more front end features, but you need to get that in the hands of the users first, really, before you know how they're going to use it, I guess, because a lot of this is just taking a guess. Go ahead, Chris.
I've got apologies, it's quite noisy here, so that might be background noise, but really interested to get a view on with the work that's been done so far. Obviously this is for one particular application, but it could be used for many different applications, I guess. What's your view in terms of the potential for this to be repurposed, you know, the core of the application to be repurposed for other different applications of a similar nature?
Yeah, so it depends what level you go at. So a serverless web app that we deploy in our AWS environment that talks to a NoSQL database with an API host, an API gateway, and a Lambda function. Yeah, that's now code that you guys can replicate in other projects. Other projects can come along, see how we did it. In the platform team, we're happy to help people get set up with those types of projects. And then you've got the next layer up, which is obviously the map element to it. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we've figured out about geospatial data, because it is a bit tricky to like get your head around how these types of things work, and getting a longitude and latitude for each and every item that you've got in your table. And then actually, when you realize that 95% of your data set is located in the central belt of Scotland, that's quite a tough problem to solve. I mean, Google Maps doesn't really have this problem because when you load up all the, all the coffee shops in your area, Google Maps, right? It's just doing a query to find like, a square area of all the points of interest, and it's able to just hit a database. For this, we have to return every soldier in the database because most of them are in a really small spot around Stirling Castle, and that's a lot of data. It doesn't work like lean itself to like SQL databases because you want to return the entire database back to the front end, and that can be really slow. And then we have to educate the charity and say, actually, in these little tiles of each individual soldier, you want to keep it as minimal as possible, because otherwise it's going to take a really long time to load up. So that's why you need this archive feature where you can have your history, you can have all of the like details of awards that they won. If you return that back to the map just for an icon, it's not going to be usable in any way. So that's sort of it.
Can you use an Ajax sort of asynchronous type of approach to that? So you don't have to load the whole data set. When somebody clicks on it, just fetches the data for that individual.
Yeah, you could do like a secondary call, so you can load up like based on an individual, and fill out a little bit more data on that. The reason that we didn't go down that route initially is just because firstly it was more work. We wanted to get something as simple as possible. Yeah, secondly, like we needed to then think about how the each individual record like related to like more information about it. So to keep it simple, we removed like any relational nature of the database, and we just stored it in NoSQL and DynamoDB, and we just retrieve every record that we have. So we would have to sort of assign some way of identifying each one, and then that type of thing, which is all doable, but yeah, not in the first instance.
Thank you.
Brad, can I just take it for a sec? Because just on that, with other uses for it, the Argyll's Museum are already demonstrating this to the other regimental associations, of which there are a number. The Argyll's obviously are fairly recently amalgamated regiment, but several of the others apparently have museums that are all also interested in it. So the CEO at the Argyll's was already taking out and demonstrating it. The other versions of it for the other regiments will be identical, obviously with different databases, and the regimental logos of the other regiments. I think from what Brad's saying in discussions earlier, what we're really trying to achieve at the moment is to get the Argyll's working with this, because up till now it's really only been demonstrated. So a lot of the problem has been with the scarcity of information in the databases. Brad was mentioning there that the bulk of the database, which we had of 30,000, only about 3,000 were fully usable, i.e. they had a location of date of birth, place of birth, and some information as well for where they served, something you could click on. The vast bulk of them were just first and second name. And obviously for a package which demonstrates a geographical location and visual, if all you've got is a list of first and second name, it's just, you can do nothing with it. So what we're really doing at the moment is like, okay, this all works. You can also find people just using first and second name, because Brad's added that functionality to it, but hand it back to Argyll's, and we've now having discussions with them, just showing them what they need to do, get full functionality out of it. I update the database so they can get full usage of the package for their entire data of veterans, and get the access to all of that. So it has huge potential. Argyll's are at the moment very enthusiastic about it. I said we have the presentation this afternoon, and Brad's done a fantastic job of making sure that we align what their underlying requirements were with how the package actually works. Great, thanks, Brad.
Cheers, Alex. Yeah, another question. Is it Hila?
Yeah, so I just had a question about the tech stack you used. I don't know if this is a simple or too simple question, but you used React, but what other technologies did you use? And also, if you would have been involved from the start, would you have used something else?
Yeah, fair question. So the front end React, the mapping library is one called Leaflet, which is an open source library. I probably wouldn't have picked Leaflet from day one because it is quite old. There is React support. The packages haven't seen much change in the last like 5 to 6 years. And I personally think that using something, even if it's charged based on usage, is worthwhile for the time that it takes you to understand it and see like real life examples of it being used, and then the added features that you get. So what we had to do for this project when we realized that we only have like a town name rather than like the geospatial like coordinates, one of the developers, Alan, ran a script to put that into some form of web like long lat returner. I can't remember what application he used, but you had to go through the whole database and run a script against it to get that data. Now, the way that the charity wants it to work in the future, they want somebody to be able to say that my relative was born in Dunfermline, and they want the application to tell you what the longitude and latitude is. Currently, all that's preloaded, so we would need an API to be able to do that. And that's why I would use one of the modern like mapping libraries that you would pay for, is because you could just ask them based on this town name, what is the coordinates, and then you could get that data back and then add it to your database, and you wouldn't have to have these manual processes like we had to do beforehand. And then the rest of the back end on AWS. So we use CloudFront as a content distribution network. The JavaScript is hosted in an S3 bucket behind the CloudFront. We have an API gateway that we connect to via a Lambda function, and the Lambda function retrieves data from DynamoDB. And that's pretty much it. I think there's scope for a little bit more static content to be put into S3. So some more of the like the soldier images that they want to have in the future, we could link to outside of DynamoDB rather than keeping that data there. That would be useful. But other than that, I don't think it actually makes too much sense to go down the relational route and have all these records which are referenceable. I think we can achieve like really similar functionality without having to run any servers. Yeah, it's definitely like best fit for serverless type application.
And how about maintaining the application? Like, what kind of plan is there? And also, can the client themselves update the database? I guess not.
They want to be able to, but what we would do is like in the archive function, we would put like an admin panel in, and we would give them the ability. They don't want their end users to be able to update the database directly, which is right. That's correct. They want to own the data. Currently, they send us their files on CSV and we upload them. Yeah, so we'd need that like admin functionality. And then maintainability, yeah, so all of the infrastructure is code in CDK. So it's all contained in the Git repo that if you are a member of the STA GitHub, you can go and have a look at. There's also CI/CD enabled on that. So using GitHub Actions on every successful merge to the repository, we deploy to AWS.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, I'm just going to quickly like cover off. I think I've covered some of the points that I was going to share, but I'll go through it anyway. Some of the like ways in which we found the project needed to change and how we went about that. So go back to my PowerPoint. Cool. So yeah, there's a hell of a lot going on, and one of the first things that we looked at as a new team to get this over the line was what are the fundamentals of the project? Like, what do we actually have? And as we mentioned a few times, there's roughly 30,000 records of soldiers. Only 9% of them had a value for their place of birth. So we knew that right away we can't put all of these on a map. The only common data across every record was their rank, their surname, and their date of birth. So even if we did have a place of birth and we could put them on a map, these really are the only like few elements that we're going to be able to return for every soldier.
And probably worth adding to that for you, Brad, as well. It was something that the project team themselves got really worried about, guys. So, you know, within the projects, you can only make data visually useful if there's enough data to do that, basically. So I think there was a huge learning curve for the original team as to, you know, setting out that minimum spec side of things. You can't magic something out of nothing, basically. So there was also a learning curve for the client there, because they were like, we've got all this data, and it's kind of like, actually a huge proportion of it didn't add up and didn't come together as they were hoping.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where the technology side of the problem becomes a people problem, and the charity themselves really need to understand what they're asking and what the gap is between what they want and what they can currently achieve based on the requirements that they have. So yeah, how about where we went from there? So I started to reevaluate some of the early tech decisions. So some of the early ones were that we were going to run relational databases and we were going to host the application on EC2. And potentially that was done based on like skill set of volunteers to get a demo up and running, but we know that that wasn't going to work for us long term. So we evaluated the cost of that, the fact that the data actually wasn't that relational at all, what the front end needed to be. So really it was client side rendered, and we didn't really need any more than that. What actually would make the customer happy? What's the minimum that's going to get them something in their hands that they can use and be happy with? And even if they're telling you they need all the features in the world, and then how much will it cost? So yeah, we did a quick dirty cost summary of what the original like demo architecture would be, and it was roughly in the region of $100 a year, but that's without any users. That's without storing more data and growing from there. So moving to a serverless architecture, it's now in the pennies. So some of the lessons that I personally learned along the way. So it's a really big time commitment to take on a project like this, where you're going to build something where nothing exists currently. You're going to design it from scratch. You're going to keep talking to the charity about their requirements, keep bringing them along the way with you. The work that I put in has probably been 3 months out of the past 6 to 9. The time in between that has been waiting for responses for the charity, speaking to them again, demoing it to them again, gathering their feedback before we're able to like move forward. Like for instance, one thing we're waiting on right now is for them to confirm the domain name that they want to use, but the application has been hosted on the public internet for the past couple of months and has been ready for them to use, but all they need to do is just decide what they want to call it and then purchase the domain name, and we can resolve that. And this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, like some of these are, but you know, the customer is mostly wrong because they're not the experts in the technology that you want to use. They're not necessarily going to understand. They've got great ideas and you should definitely like take them all in. But don't be afraid to push back because they're expecting you to be the expert in this, not themselves. And yeah, this is one of my fundamental principles, is just always to underpromise and then overdeliver, telling them what is possible, but also aligning that to timelines. So yes, the complex version that you want to get to, absolutely possible, but what I can give you in this amount of time something that you can start to use and give me feedback on, that's the doable. And this one, if you don't keep constant communication and get a constant feedback loop, you can lose sight of the goal, and the end goal can just keep drifting on and on and on with like no end in sight. So agreeing like an end to particular phases and stages. What Alex has been able to do in the last like 6 months is say, hey, we're going to agree to make these changes that you asked for in the last meeting, and in the next 2 weeks we're going to deliver those, and then we want you to come back to the table in that 2 weeks and then confirm that you're happy with it. And that's where we've got to a point where we're able to like hand over now. Talking to your customer about what you've managed to do is really cool for you and really exciting. But really that's for like our internal audience. They just don't care. They just want to see the end product. So even though you managed to learn a new technology, it's all gobbledygook to them, to be honest, like in some respects. Like they're the experts in their domain. Using agile delivery, again, it's another internal thing that we do to try and get the process off the ground, but the customer doesn't understand that. So they kind of need to know from you what you're going to deliver and when and why. So if you're going to cut features that they really asked for to get something in the next few weeks, you got to bring them along with that journey for you. Otherwise, they end up disappointed. When we went from a demo that had every feature that the customer wanted to a live proof of concept that was in their hands but had 10% of what they asked for, they were a little bit upset. But the technical like leaps that we had to go through to get to that 10% worth of features in an actual project was a lot of work and a lot of effort. And if we'd have brought them along from the start, then they maybe would have grasped that, and it wouldn't have put us back in terms of the relationship a little bit. Yeah, they're not trustworthy when you ask them things and they tell you, yes, we've got that data. You've got to validate everything, and if you can't speak to like customers, like their end users, then try and do so through some other mechanism. Try and get feedback as much as possible.
Maybe word it as optimistic, Brad, rather than untrustworthy.
Yeah,
people are always optimistic about their data.
yeah, for sure.
You also haven't put here the fact that you did effectively train up 2 CEOs.
Yeah.
Neither of them had familiarity with technology projects at all. So there was a huge investment in their learning curve. So not to be underestimated, because even Harvey, who moved on, has come back asking for more work with a different charity, because he's really started to see the value of what technology can give. I'm not sure if it's Kirsty or Alistair who has their hand up.
That'll be me again. So, just picking up on one of the things you said as you went through, Brad, with the archive section, you said that there was some AI generated UI.
Yeah.
How has that been done? I mean, is that going from something like a Figma design and using the AI add-ons from Figma to generate that, or have you got what doing that?
Yeah, it's quite a cool thing. I'd like to use it more often. And I know that there are a number of products like coming down the line that are going to do this. So it's text input, React code output. Really simple. So you can see in I can share a link to it, but in the demo that I showed you, it was 5 separate prompts. So I started off with, I want to create an archive of soldiers, and then you can iterate on that just by saying, I want there to be a heading, I want there to be a hero image, I want it to be a table, I want the data to be editable. And in under like 15 minutes, I was able to just put that together and say, hey, I think this is what you need. Does this look about right? And then I can educate them as to why they need it like that. Yeah, it's definitely faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested that you use a text prompt and iterate on that to get the code output, and so obviously that's giving you code that you can then build on. So you haven't tried any of the Figma plugins that take, mock-up design and create a UI interface for it?
I've seen those. Yeah. I'm not a designer. I prefer to just work like in code. So avoiding the Figma part altogether is like my preference. I know that there's a project coming out. I know that so the project that I used is built by a company called Vercel, which are a cloud hosting provider, and they do it to get more people to use their JavaScript library Next.js. But I built a proof of concept, and we talked about this in my day job about how, for example, in the volunteer app demonstration that we saw yesterday, and the designers had worked really hard on a design system. That's vital. Like every company should have that, and every like overall organization that's going to launch a number of projects should have general UI that they want to use and a bunch of examples. So you could host that in GitHub. You could connect that to an application, and then the application would just take text input and give you the code output. So the designers still work in Figma. They still have a lot of input on what design should look like, and they should still continue to do that. But they should just work on the system, and they should work on examples of their designs put together, and then they should have an LLM be able to write the React code based on that. That's where I see it going. But that's me going off topic. Yeah.
No, I mean, I get it. And you're a developer, so you're really comfortable doing that. I'm just thinking of one other project perhaps, and you might have some on that. Is we do have a project where we had designers who use Figma and have created the mock-ups, the prototypes, and
Yeah.
very interesting to know how good a job an AI do take that Figma design and generate the code to replicate.
Yeah, you don't even need an LLM to go from Figma to React code now. I don't think there's lots of ways of doing that. So
There's a plugin, it just costs money, Alistair.
yeah, you can do it in AWS. But yeah, I'm not here to say.
I did say it does cost money. I don't know how much they cost, but I mean,
He said yes, didn't he? Everyone heard yes.
Not quite, but it was a maybe.
Yeah. Who is it? A few people have played with the Figma code generating, and they said it was solid for prototype, but might not be deploy ready. But if that gets you something that you can concept test super easy, that's
I mean,
that's
I
brilliant.
was thinking that if it saves you 50% of the time and does all the really tedious, repetitive stuff for you, I wouldn't expect it would spit out code that you would just deploy. But like I say, if it does all the stuff that is tedious and repetitive, then it's a pretty standard way of doing it, then it seems like the way.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just gonna say a little bit of what you said, Brad, but when I came into the project, I could clearly see right away some of the issues, and some of that was not knowing at the very beginning what the museum wanted. So it was kind of just working off of the data that we had. And the current developers were a little bit caught up on the data that they had, and there was not enough of bringing the customer along. So there had been quite a bit of a gap between the last meeting that was had with Harvey, comparing, and the next thing was, hey, we need to have a meeting with Harvey to go back to the drawing board to figure out what we're trying to accomplish. So I think a lot of it was the developers and the team in general just trying to create something that they thought would work, and not really having a clear idea of what was to be created. But again, kind of like you said, it was Joanna, it was more of training the Harvey and them along the way as well, because they had no experience and didn't have an idea of what they were looking for either. So I think even learning from the very beginning to understand what the customer wants, even if they're new to it, to just kind of get some pinpoints of kind of what we're looking for. And if the data doesn't work, again, just going ahead and reaching back out to them and saying, hey, we can't work with this. What is the very minimum that we can work on and deliver? And just being able to give them something a little bit earlier, I think would have really cut this project down a lot.
Yep, for sure. Definitely. Oh, it's going backwards now. I'm not sure how many of these I've got. Oh, there's one more. Yeah, you might never get those actual, that's basically what Amber's saying. You might not get the data that you're asking for. So try not to build ahead of those requirements. Yeah, some advice for me. I can't remember how controversial these are, so I might have to skip through.
Just go
some.
for it, Brad.
If you're not sure, just ask someone who might be, come along to a platform team meeting or reach out in Slack. But ask often if you really don't know where you need to go next. Try seeing your customer as a partner, like a product owner that is like I guess doesn't really know what the product should be. In the technical world, like in the actual teams out in businesses, the product owner should always be the person that is like building on behalf of the customer. So when we have like a customer in between the customer, when we're doing sort of business to business, it can get really difficult to like understand what the needs are. So you have to bring them along with you and talk to them as much as possible. And like Amber said, like engaging with the CEO and understanding what his needs are is the best way. Yeah, free products, and that goes to the mapping libraries and stuff, like and using things that aren't databases as databases. Free products, they don't exist. Yeah. The adage is that if the product is free, then you're the product. So try and pick a pricing model for a product that works based on the usage pattern that you're going to be using. And typically like serverless is going to be the right choice when you're talking about low numbers of requests and things like that. Something that I had to learn along the way is like being respectful of what came before you and don't just turn it all down. Like, although I removed a lot of code from this application, all the code still lives in the repository. We can go back to it. We can bring it up to date based on the modern architecture, and we can reference it and use it. But for a long time, it was difficult to just go through and remove what wasn't necessary before being able to get something out of the door. So yeah, being respectful of what came before and being able to speak to the other volunteers that worked on your project and get their opinion. And then equally, don't assume that your solution is going to be the one to go forward. Like someone else is going to come along and probably question all the work I've done, but I've got data to back up the pricing of what we've picked. I've got data to back up based on usage patterns and things like that. So I'm not too worried that it would go in the wrong direction unless technology significantly changes in the next few years. And avoid burning yourself out and your team. Take regular breaks, like away from volunteering if needs be. If you are working in an agile way and you're working in sprints, try and schedule a sprint where you're not working and maybe you can hand over to someone else. Flip the role of lead developer and reviewer, and maybe just have a week where you just approve someone else's work or read through it rather than like constantly being the one to always drive things forward, because that can lead to exhaustion. Yeah. Any other questions? That's all I've got.
I really want to echo your last point there, Brad. It's very easy to get hooked into solving these problems, and I think that advice you say, where taking a week off where you maybe step back and you're reviewing rather than leading the charge, do think about your own work patterns with volunteering. We want to make sure you get to the place you'd like, you get that kind of feedback or that achievement that you're looking for. And sometimes with the more complicated project, it just is a lot of time. And when that time is after your day job, it just extends that period even longer. So it's good advice to flip into that reviewer versus builder, just to kind of give yourself the breaks. But I mean, absolutely brilliant work, guys. There is, I mean, already when we started the SDA projects map, the guys were directed here to have a look at what was there, seeing what components, there's a number of projects that are asking for sort of map visualization of all sorts of different things. And sometimes charities want to pay and sometimes they don't. I think what this has done really nicely is given the museum just enough to see if this is useful, see if it achieves what they want it to achieve. You know, there was a danger definitely at one point of building a Ferrari when we didn't even know if anybody was interested in going to see this data. So, you know, the museum has its own exercise of marketing to do now to make sure people are even aware this exists, and they need to think about whether they're going to integrate it into the actual physical museum themselves. Can you have a look at this if you go and visit the museum? So, you know, this allows that work on their side to make sure this does get used. But yeah, I mean, it's brilliant that they're already talking to other people as well, because then obviously that reuse element comes through. But you know, I know Amber, Brad, Alex, pretty much most of the team had to step away due to starting new jobs and things like that before you all stepped in. So the other thing I'd probably highlight to people is, you know, we're definitely solving better for this, but at the time the handovers were really trying to drag people back who'd started jobs and stuff like that to say, can you spare some time? And you know, that handover element very much in the volunteer app presentation, we highlighted the importance and the bedrock that Notion now provides for the projects, so that you're thinking on paper, and people can pick up where you've left off from. Is there any questions from anybody else? Blown away by oh, that's really lovely, Marjorie. Marjorie's just said, blown away by what you've all achieved, very excited as I have a personal interest as grandpa, and it's just shut. Well, I'm sorry. As you had a grandpa in the area. Oh, that's lovely. That's
Nice.
really lovely. Is it Colin? Colin the cat and dog.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't get off mute there. Yeah, it looks great, and it's really interesting to hear all the challenges these projects throw up. And I was just wondering whether there's an appetite from the charity or anything for whether they have other untapped data sources that might be explored, that modern technology might be able to help get some of this data to backfill it in, for instance, recruiting offices or whatever they have paper records of or anything like that. Is that something that there would be a further development for or a call for?
You imagine that they would. And to go back to one of the points I put about being a big time commitment, right? So one of the first things that the charity talked about was this Edinburgh Witches map, which was great, and like maybe not visually, but data wise, they were able to say where all the witches that were executed over the 1500s, where they all lived across Edinburgh and the rest of Scotland. When I looked at that project, what struck me was the amount of data that they had to overlay from the historical location boundaries to the modern ones. And when I read more about the project, it said this was a PhD candidate's full-time project for 6 months. Yeah. And that articulates how much work you have to go in to get the data quality right. And so I just said that to the charity, you can't just assume that your data is good to go and is good to be put into, into the world in a technology project. You need to invest in that, really. It's all about your data quality. And their response was actually, yeah, we do get history grads that come in every summer. So maybe we can start to modernize some of this data. If you could maybe guide us on what we need based on our use case, then we can maybe set that as a task for graduates in future, and then more projects can come out of that. But
that's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely something there.
And Colin, even I think shifting through the data, it had stuff like Bob went on to become the local baker, and his whole family. If there was so many bits of unstructured data that could be explored to see how you could look at it as well. Not all of it was just the regiment. A lot of it then was the local communities and other bits and pieces as well. And they'd had a series of volunteers come in and just collect stuff, but they'd never put a structure around the data.
Yeah, so an interesting little project, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So if you gave them then templates or ways of collecting it, I think you would get far more usable data. but you know, they were just interested in the stories. Anya, you
Yeah.
have your hand up as well.
Hi. Very nice presentation, very nice project. I'm blown away. This is one kind of, I think Joanna might know about it. I have proposed something similar for the project which I'm working on at the moment with working families. I have spoken about it to Justina regarding this. Something similar, like I'm doing my master's project, so I want to take it to this kind of level for my master's. So I had a discussion with Justina past 2 weeks. It is very much similar to the presentation which Brad has shown today, like something related to the cloud technology, linking their data source. So it would be great if I can take it forward. And I would definitely require Brad's help on this to achieve this as well. I'm not sure whether Joanna knows about this proposal, which I have already put it to Justina.
Not yet, but I do now.
Okay, okay. Because I'm really interested. I saw their data set. It's really interesting. It's kind of challenging as well. It's quite wide, but I can see a possibility of a app development in that. So if we can work forward, I think it can be a good project as well. We can use the technologies which Brad has come up with as well to integrate into this. Maybe I don't know this is the right platform to talk about that project. I just thought it is linked, so I thought to talk about it right now.
No, it's good to share. It gives everybody an idea of the other bits and pieces going on. The working families data is far more structured. It's a completely different kettle of fish to what we got from the Argyll Museum.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out on Slack if you have any questions.
Thanks, Brad.
No worries.
Anybody else have any questions, anything they want to? Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Brad, and thank you so much, guys. And I know hopefully David and the rest of the team will watch this on catch up. You know, it's been amazing seeing how this has come to life, and very much appreciate the extra time you've all put into doing this presentation for everybody as well.
No problem at all. Thanks
Excellent.
for the opportunity.
Brilliant.
Very much.
Can you just take off the screen share for a sec, because you're not seeing everybody's faces and you're practically clapping. So thank you very much. Round of applause to the team.
Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank
you. Bye.
Weird princess. Excellent.
Thanks, Joe.
Well done, Alex. Thank you for pulling that together.
No,
In fact, why don't I stop recording?